Number 10. Thomas Scully Powers. In the middle of a live Alcoholics Anonymous Zoom meeting on May the 21st of 2020, 32-year-old Thomas Scully Powers suddenly began stabbing his father, Dwight, repeatedly while in the nude. The other 20 members of the meeting frantically began calling 911, but it reportedly took them several minutes to establish the Powers' exact location. In the meantime, Scully Powers stabbed his father over 15 times, killing him in the process. It was eventually determined that the incident was unfolding at Dwight's apartment in Amityville, New Jersey. When police arrived at the home, Scully Powers rushed to the second floor and jumped out the window. Inside, officers discovered 72-year-old Dwight's nearly decapitated body, as well as evidence that his son had used a mop and bucket to try and clean up the crime scene. Scully Powers was ultimately apprehended a mile away from the apartment, where law enforcement found him trying to wash his father's blood off of his body with several bottles of Dr. Pepper, which he'd stolen from a nearby deli. The young man allegedly confessed to the crime during police questioning and was consequently charged with murder, for which he faced a possible prison sentence of 25 years to life. Number 9. Busby. On January the 14th of 2022, a Canadian video game streamer known as Busby was recording a session of Apex Legends when police officers suddenly barged into his room. The Twitch streamer had been struggling with the game and had loudly requested help from his teammates multiple times. His screams concerned the neighbors, who immediately contacted the authorities, believing there to be someone in urgent distress. Police officers made their way into the apartment as they too heard the agonized yelling and were captured on Busby's webcam, approaching him from behind. Startled, the young Toronto resident jumped up as one of the officers placed a hand on his shoulder. The gamer apologized for creating a disturbance and assured the officers that he required no assistance. Number 8. Belle Grace. In 2022, British OnlyFans model Belle Grace saved one of her regular subscribers' life after noticing a growth on his testicles, which turned out to be cancer. 27-year-old Belle, who worked as a carer for autistic children and adults before the COVID pandemic, had begun offering her erotic services over the online platform in 2020. Over the course of several intimate video calls with Grace, the client in question, whose name wasn't disclosed to the public, revealed that his genitals had been getting increasingly bigger. The young woman realized that one of the man's testicles was roughly 4 times larger than the other and encouraged him to book an appointment with a doctor. Although the man was embarrassed by the abnormality and initially hesitant to seek professional help, he eventually heeded the model's advice. He subsequently told Grace that the doctor had discovered an aggressive form of testicular cancer. The prompt diagnosis allowed the man to undergo successful surgery and become cancer-free. Number 7. Donald J. Williams. On the morning of August the 11th of 2020, 27-year-old Donald J. Williams gunned down his ex-girlfriend, Maribel Rosada Martinez, as was captured on her daughter's webcam. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, schools in Martin County, Florida, where 32-year-old Rosado Martinez lived with her 6 children, were closed. Classes thus took place over Zoom. While Rosado Martinez's 10-year-old daughter was online for her morning lesson, loud screaming and profanity prompted her teacher to mute the meeting's audio. The young girl then covered her ears before the screen abruptly went black. It later emerged that Williams had broken into the house and opened fire on his ex, whom he'd been separated from for over a year and a half at the time. One of the bullets missed Rosado Martinez and shattered her daughter's laptop screen instead, which accounted for the blackout. Fortunately, none of the 6 children suffered any injuries during the shooting. Williams fled the scene before being tracked down and arrested about 40 minutes later. A Martin County grand jury indicted the man on capital murder charges in February of 2021. As of the case's latest developments, the legal proceedings were still ongoing. Number 6. Nicola Madden. On January the 11th of 2022, Nicola Madden died suddenly during a work Zoom meeting attended by her daughter and several colleagues. Subsequent reports indicated that Madden had suffered a massive heart attack at her home in Waterloo, Liverpool. The incident, which happened so suddenly that emergency services couldn't arrive in time to render her aid, reportedly took place the day after her 43rd birthday. Madden's daughter immediately called her father, Stuart McDougall, who in turn dialed 999. McDougall, who'd been amicably separated from Madden at the time of her death, set up a GoFundMe page to help pay for the resulting funeral expenses, managing to raise over $6,000 within the first 24 hours. Number 5. Micah J22. A female TikTok user identified only as Micah J22 sparked furious online debate after posting several videos in which she explained why she'd been fired from her home office job. In July of 2022, the woman told her followers that she'd used her laptop to work online but was locked out of the system after her employers had caught her cooking while on the clock. Her contract reportedly stipulated that she was not allowed to leave her desk during work hours and also mandated that the webcam remain activated to allow her activity to be monitored. Micah J22 complained about how her employers dealt with the situation, as they'd first told her she was fired before relenting slightly and opting to suspend her instead. Then they restored their original decision and fired her once again. Several viewers posted comments in support of the woman. Many were quick to point out the apparent hypocrisy of the fact that an employee working at an office could take a snack break, but those working from home weren't afforded similar privileges. Number 4. Alexandria MORRA. Alexandria MORRA was arrested by the police in Ontario, Canada, after live streaming intimate acts from a public library. At the age of 21, MORRA, known online as Lil Secret, reportedly published over 50 videos beginning in the fall of 2014, all of which were recorded at either the Riverside or Fontainebleau branches of the library. During the salacious recordings, she exposed her genitals on camera and even employed certain adult toys on a number of occasions. On December the 29th of 2014, MORRA was reportedly caught in the act by a library worker who demanded she leave the premises. The discovery prompted an official police investigation, but MORRA wasn't arrested until March the 6th, when she went to the authorities of her own accord. She pleaded guilty to her criminal charges during a pre-trial hearing and was later sentenced to a year of probation plus a $250 fine. She was also forbidden from accessing local public libraries and required to provide a sample of her DNA to the Canadian Registry. Number 3. Jason Marshall. On January the 7th of 2013, UK man Jason Marshall murdered his lover, 58-year-old Peter Fasoli, before setting his apartment on fire and fleeing the country. The entire episode was recorded on camera, beginning with an intimate encounter between Fasoli and Marshall, who was in his 20s at the time, before the situation quickly escalated. Marshall, posing as a policeman, began physically overpowering Fasoli and threatening him with a knife. The latter was then dragged out of the camera's purview as Marshall proceeded to fatally strangle him. Audio recording revealed that the man then spread a flammable liquid around the apartment and set it ablaze to destroy evidence of the crime. Marshall used the victim's credit cards to purchase a plane ticket to Italy. He also began sending concerned messages to Fasoli in an attempt to divert suspicions away from him. The house fire was initially ruled an accident, but in November of 2014, webcam footage of the grisly incident surfaced when the victim's nephew decided to research his family history. After reviewing his late uncle's hard drive, which had been recovered from the flames, the nephew came upon a 7-hour recording that included the murder itself and immediately contacted the authorities. Investigators subsequently learned that Marshall had been imprisoned in Italy since July the 9th of 2014, serving a 16-year sentence for the murder of 67-year-old Vincenzo Lale in Rome. For Fasoli's killing, Marshall was extradited to the UK and sentenced to life, with a minimum of 39 years before he could be considered for parole. Number 2. Brian Dixon. On April the 15th of 2011, 32-year-old Brian Dixon gained access to a Chinese exchange student's apartment while she chatted with her ex-boyfriend via webcam. 23-year-old Quan Liu, a foreign student enrolled at New York University, was strangled by the intruder as her ex, Xian Meng, watched in helpless horror. Liu was then dragged away from the camera and Dixon assaulted her. Meng eventually saw an unclothed Dixon appear on Liu's camera before the screen abruptly shut off. By the time the police arrived at the scene, Liu was already dead. Although the ensuing autopsy's results were inconclusive, medical examiners listed mechanical asphyxiation as the most likely cause of death. DNA found on the victim's body was linked to Dixon, who it subsequently emerged had a documented history of violence. On April the 7th of 2014, Dixon was found guilty of murder and consequently sentenced to 25 years to life behind bars. Number 1. Joshua Kaufman. California resident Joshua Kaufman used his MacBook's remote camera capabilities to aid the police in capturing a thief who'd broken into his Oakland apartment and stolen the device. Kaufman, who worked as a designer, reported the incident to the authorities in March of 2011, listing his laptop, Kindle, and jewelry as the items stolen by the intruder. Dissatisfied with the police response, Kaufman decided to use a security app called Hidden to try and locate the computer himself. The app allowed him to track his device as well as use the webcam to take pictures when it was activated. It took a few days for the thief to turn on the laptop, but when he did, Kaufman immediately contacted the police, sending them pictures of the man as well as personal information he'd typed, including his work email address and Facebook account. Officers initially disregarded the creatively obtained evidence, prompting Kaufman to post the photos online. He immediately garnered the attention of the press, at which point the police took action. The thief was ultimately identified as 27-year-old Muthana Aldabashi. The latter was arrested at his Oakland home, allowing Kaufman and his laptop to be reunited at long last. Thanks for watching. Would you rather never be able to turn off your webcam or have your cell phone usage restricted to 1 hour per day? Let us know in the comments section below.